Hi, my name is Bernie Levy. It's August 26, 2009. I'm here to interview Sam Anfang for the Jewish Historical Society Oral History Project. We're at his home on Washington Boulevard on the 11th floor, and this recording, this narration, will become part of the Jewish Historical Society archives. Hi Sam, how you doing? I have been looking forward to interviewing you because I started asking you a few months ago, and between your golf games and all your other activities, we finally found the time, so I'm glad that we're doing this now. What can you tell us about your family, say your parents, where they came from or where you came from and all of that?
Well, I was born in December 31st, 1910, in a little shtetl town called Nisko in Poland. I had 4 sisters, and in 1913, I was then about 2.5 years old. My father left because we knew the war was coming, and he was about to go in the army. Anyway, he left at night, and he first went to England, and a year later he went to America. I sort of started to think as a person when one day I see my mother digging a hole in the backyard, and I couldn't comprehend what she was doing. Then all of a sudden she goes in the house and she takes out the candlesticks and buries them. And she had bundles for each one of us, and we left the house. In fact, the whole town left. We heard the booming of the guns as the Russians were attacking. And we called it the Flicht, the flight. The roads were filled with people. All the farms were abandoned. And it was, naturally, the war in Europe breaks out in the summertime because they have no paved roads, and they're muddy after the winter. When they dry out, that's when the hostilities started. Well, at night we used to sleep in the fields, or we used to go into an abandoned house. And one day we reached a town called Reisha, and we went into a house. In my group, there were 19 of us, my family. And in eastern Poland, in August, it starts getting cold. So my mother says to me, Shlomo, come with me. And we went to the freight yards, and we were gathering coal along the tracks, when all of a sudden we see soldiers running towards us and shooting guns. The Russians attacked the town. And my mother, she had an apron full of coal. She dropped it, and we ran back into town. And we went into this house, and the Russians came in, and I happened to look out the window, and there one of the Cossacks had a Jew by the beard, and my mother pulled me away. Anyway, the next day, the Austrians attacked and drove him out, and when they drove him out, we left. And we were living off the land for a few days, and one day they took all the people that they could gather and put them on freight trains. We were on this freight train. Where it was going, we didn't know. And after about a day and a half, we wound up in Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia was a neutral country. I was then 3.5 years old. I didn't know what was going on, and we found ourselves in an apartment, and the older people all got jobs. There was demand for labor because of the war, and it's a funny thing. I have a great memory, but the period in Czechoslovakia, in Prague, I just can't remember a darn thing. Something must have happened. Anyway, while we were in Czechoslovakia, you ever hear of HIAS? HIAS? Hebrew Institute. They offered to send us to America. My family. But I know there was a discussion went on. We didn't know where our father was. We didn't get any communication since the war broke out. And it was this, after 4 years in Prague, we decided to go back to Poland. And we felt that he would get in touch with us that way. Well, we went back to Poland, and we got into the state, into Nisko. There's 3 or 4 houses standing. All the others were destroyed. There were dead horses all over the place. Well, when we came back to Poland and we went to our house was filled with 100 people or more. And we finally got everybody to leave. We had no money, and things were really bad. It's a question of finding something to eat. So my mother rented out one part of the house to one family, and another part of the house to another family. And things were really rough. I remember vividly, one night I found myself in shul. In Poland they have these, the shuls made out of logs. And I was there, and it was Friday night, and there were men standing around wearing their silk robes. You ever see how the Orthodox, they wear these silk robes tied, and one of them says to them, "Geh not kick. The food that spielt sich in America." I was dressed in rags. Things were really rough. Anyway, my father was a tailor, and he evidently did fairly well. There were no wealthy people in Nisko. And in the back of the house, we had an orchard. How big it was, I don't remember, but my mother sold the orchard. It was a very nice piece of property. And she sold the orchard, and we lived on that for a while. Then one day in after 1918, we received a postcard from my father. And he sent us tickets to come to America. He sent us tickets on a very good ship, the Ile de la France. Anyway, my mother sold the house. I'll tell you what she got for it. She got $400 for the house. But remember, we're going back 1918. Anyway, we sold the house for $400, and we got ready, and we went first to Paris. When we got to Paris, my mother went to the shipping line, and they told her the Ile de la France is laid up. It wouldn't be sailing for 6 months. And they exchanged her tickets for a ship that didn't go to New York, but it went to Quebec. where the Elder La France took 5 days, this took 15 days. And then when we got to Quebec, we took the train to New York, and later on we found out that there was nothing, that the ship was running, but they screwed us out of the good tickets, so to speak. And so my father had an apartment for us in Harlem, which at that time was a very good, very nice area. And it was in the summertime, and a day later I went.
How old were you and what year was that?
I was 9.5 years old. Incidentally, after we got to Poland, after a while the schools opened, and we all went the first day to school. When we got to class, the priest calls me up, takes my hand like this, and whacks it, and whacks it. And then he takes the other hand. That happened to every Jewish child in this school. That was the end of schooling. So, anyway, this is a little incident. As I was staying on the stoop the second day I'm in America, a kid comes over to me, a boy, and he says, "Willst spielen tennis?" So I says to him, "Was ist tennis?" He says, "Geh Ivan to bring his Schwester's racket." He comes out with 2 tennis rackets, and he takes me over to Central Park. And I got the idea. He was on one side of the court. Anyway, for the rest of the summer, I was at the tennis court every day. And listen, I was fast and pretty athletic, and I started to play tennis. When school opened, I went to school, and they evidently took me into the principal's office, and there was discussion going on, and of course I didn't understand what they were talking about. The question was, what should they do with me? Here I'm 9.5 years old, never been a day in school, so they decided to put me in 1A. Of course, I felt, here I'm with little children, so to speak, but it was a very good idea, because I started from the bottom, and anyway, I graduated in 3.5 years at age level. My father was in the garment center, and I can see things were not good at the house. He used to work 2 weeks, he was laid off for 4, and things were bad. I was a good student, and I loved athletics, but I saw that things weren't right. So I told my father, I'm going to get a job. But I worked. I'll give you an idea. My first job, when it rained, I went to the 110th Street subway station with an umbrella. And when people got off the train, I used to walk them to the apartment. And they used to give me 2 cents, a nickel. I did all sorts of work before school and after school. Well, I got a job with a fellow called Harry Rothman. I don't know, you might have heard of him. Harry Rothman was a jobber, a clothing jobber. You know what a jobber is? And I was his first employee. Incidentally, Harry Rothman, when he finally passed away, left an estate of $100 million. I'll tell you, he made his, anyway, he was in the wholesale business, but we were on Broadway and Bleecker Street. And one day a man comes in, he says, "Can I buy a pair of pants?" So I went and I sold him a pair of pants. And another man came in, and I started the retail business for Harry Rothman. And we did very well, but Harry Rothman all of a sudden got involved in Wall Street, stock market. He used to leave at 10 o'clock, go down to Wall Street, come back at 3:30. I was alone in a store, and I did well. One of my the things that I was a great salesman, and he used to come in. I used to empty my pockets, and I said, "Here's what I took in." Anyway, to make a long story short, I used to earn $12 a week. $5 went to my mother. $2 was for lunch and car fare, and $5 went into the bank. And then when the retail business got good, we were open 7 days a week. I got an extra $3 for Sundays. Well, we did so well that at age 16 I was making $45 a week. The average married man at that time was making $25 a week. Rents at that time in an apartment were $25 or $20 a month. And I banked that money. The union was trying to get at, we all had then moved upstairs, Harry Rothman, and we had a whole block. We had about 10 salesmen, and I was the manager at the place. One day Harry calls me and he says, "You're finished here." Why? He says, "I'm not going to tell you." He thought that I was instigating to bring the union in. So I went to work for another firm for about a year. Then one of the men that I was working with calls me up and he says to me that he'd like to go into business with me. So I asked him, "How much money do you have?" He says he has $2,500. I had accumulated $3,500. So we put that together and we rented a store on Broadway and Bleecker Street that was 10 foot wide and 90 foot deep. We were paying $90 a month rent, and we signed the lease, and then we went out to buy goods for the store. Nobody would sell us, because Harry Rothman said if you sell him, he'll stop buying. We had bought a lot of some clothing from a firm called H. Freeman. You ever hear H. Freeman? H. Freeman was in business since maybe 1850. So I get on the telephone, I call up H. Freeman, and a young man gets on the phone, and I tell him that we had just opened a little store, and we're having a problem getting clothing. So this young man said, "Well, come up and see us. Come up to my office." So Hy and I, they had their offices. They were a Philadelphia outfit. And they had their office at 205th Avenue. And we go up to their office, a big place, and this young man takes us into a private room. And I tell him the story that we got between us. It cost us maybe $1,000 to fix up our store. We put pipe racks in, and he listens to what I'm telling him, and then a very distinguished gentleman walks into the office. He was very well dressed, and I felt he was an official of the company, so I repeated my story, that we're not going to draw any money, we're both single. And after I finished, this gentleman says to Roy, he says, "Roy, will you excuse yourself?" And they went out, and I says to my partner, I says, "What do you think?" He says, "Gee, he said, I don't know." A couple of minutes later, this Roy comes back in, and he starts putting stacks of swatches on a table. Clothing is bought from 4x8s, swatches, and he puts them on a table, and he says, "Pick out what you want." So I start flicking through the swatches. I pick one out, pick out another. I says, look, Lou, if you tell me what my credit line is, I'll know what to pick out. By the way, the Freeman suit at that time was $18.78 wholesale. He says, pick out what you want. So I start flicking. I said, I can't work that way. Tell me what my credit line is so I'll know what to do. He said, look, the man that was just here, Mr. Ben Freeman, he owns this firm. And he told me to give you whatever you want. I said, what does that mean? He said, if you can have anything in the house. So the lumps started to come up my throat. Anyway, I picked out $4,000 worth of merchandise. You know what that means at that time? And we write up the order and we walk out, and I says to him, if they ship this order, they're crazy. We're not entitled to any such money. We go back to our little store, and the next day a truck pulls up from Philadelphia. Our order filled to the top. And well, here's the thing is, when we open up the store, the question is, what should we name our store? So one of the gentlemen that was in business today says, call yourself Salmon High. Everybody knows you as Salmon High. So we call ourselves Salmon High. And we hang up these suits, and I tell my partner, look, anybody comes in, you see a $3 profit, sell. $5, sell. Well, my partner was a great salesman. Anyway, we started to do business. We were there for 3 years, and we started with a $5 salary. 6 months later, we increased our salary to $10. And we were there for 3 years, and one day I go out to get some lunch, and I pass by on House Street. There's a sign in the window of a store for rent. So I walk into the building, and the agent was there, and I says, can I see that? You walk into the store? So we walk in the store. The store was 60 foot wide and 200 feet deep. It was a basketball court. It's a massive store. I says, how much? By the way, we were paying $90. I says, how much is your rent? He says, $350. I says to him, will you be here for the next 15, 20 minutes? He says, yes. I go back to our store, and I tell my partner, we're moving. He said, what the hell are you talking about? I says, come with me. I take him down there, and when he says to me, how much is rent? I says, $350. He says, are you insane? My partner was a great salesman, but he was no businessman, and he was scared. I says to him, now listen, he says, we're moving. I says, and finally he says, okay, we sign a lease, and a week later, we were open 7 days a week. We have a little radio on in the store, and we hear that Pearl Harbor is bombed. Now, we were both single, so I knew we were both going to go in. So I went to the landlord, and I says to him that we're both single, I'd like to break the lease. He says, listen, he says, you want to break the lease? He says, you can break the lease, but the $1,000 I'm not going to give you back. So I says to High, we're moving. Anyway, we moved into the store. We cut it in half. In the back we had our shop and storeroom. Out for furniture, we put pipe racks all around. And we go up to Freeman. Incidentally, I'll tell this later. And we move in there, and business was fantastic. the store used to be filled with people. Anyway, we were there in that store for 10 years. And we did very, very good business. But I wasn't happy down there. I wanted to move up to Fifth Avenue. And my partner says, look, we're doing great, we're making money. I said, look, I'm not happy down here. So I started on 23rd and 5th, walked up to 6th, down 24th, all the way up to 50th Street. I did that for weeks. I'm on 46th Street one day, and there's a store. It's a showroom for the Botany Mills. You ever hear of Botany Mills? Botany Mills was a manufacturer of woolens. And they had this building, it was, I don't know, 16 or 17 stories, but they had their showroom downstairs. The showroom was the most beautiful place you've ever seen.
All right.
Anyway, I look at the store, it has no sign for rent, but it's absolutely gorgeous. And so anyway, I write the Botany Mills, and I get back to the store. I figured, should I call them up? They had no, anyway, I call up Botany Mills, and I asked for the real estate department, and I asked them if that store on 46th Street is for rent. So the man says, you know, come to think of it, if we got an AA1 tenant, he says, we might be interested. He says, I says, listen to me. I'm going to give you the name of my firm, but don't let the name fool you. I says, but look us up. And we had one thing I did in business. We paid our bills on time. And we had a great rating. I tell him, Sam and hi. I said, I'd like to come up and see you. He says, come on up and see me. I go up to see him, and he says to me, I looked you up. He said, while you were coming up, he says, you know, he said, you're a fine little firm, but we're interested in a bank, he says, or an airline. He says, I'm sorry. I walk out of there. In that same building, we had a customer, Designs for Business. They did the interior for Time of Life building. And so I go in there and I said, Joe, that store downstairs is for rent. But Mr. McLaughlin don't think we're suitable. I said, will you talk to him? I go to Hickey Freeman, and I says to him, I tell him that we wanted to rent that store, and you know, they were in the woolen, Botany's in the woolen business. I had every clothing manufacturer in the city call them up. 3 days later, I get a call from Mr. McLaughlin. He says, God damn it, he said, that phone don't stop ringing. He says, come up and see me. I go up to see him. I says, Mr. McLaughlin, you're gonna be happy with us. I says, how much is the rent? He says, $26,000. We were paying $10,000. $26,000. I says, Hi's gonna have a fit. I says, so I says to him, you have a deal. My partner didn't know I made the deal. That it's okay. I go back and I tell him that we're moving, and he says, how much is the rent? I says, $26,000. He says, you're out of here. I had $26,000. To make a long story short, we signed a lease, and we decided to change our name. And anyway, we finally decided on Gentry, G-E-N-T-R-E-E. And we had a fitter by the name of Meyer. And I tell Meyer, I said, you know, Meyer, we're moving up to Fifth Avenue. He says, I'll have to change your name. He says, what are you going to call me? He says, I'll think of a name. The next day I come in, he says, did you think of a name? He says, yes. I'm going to call you Jeffrey. Well, anyway, we moved up there, and we spent quite a lot of money fixing it up. Here's a picture of the store.
Turn it around.
couple of years later, we took the second floor, the floor above us.
Okay.
And we start to advertise in the New York Times once a week, not a big ad. And but we did very well.
Did you pay your rent? Did you make your rent?
By the way, eventually we took the floor above us. Anyway, we were successful as a retail establishment. There were, I say, we had one competitor. You ever hear Paul Stewart?
Yes.
You never heard of Paul Stewart?
Yes, I did.
Well, Paul Stewart and I, we competitors. Paul Stewart is still in business. Anyway, well, you want to know about Stanford. When I first got married, we lived in Forest Hills. A couple of years later, I bought a house in New Rochelle. And how did I come to Stanford? My son, my first son, was born autistic. And I had him in private schools in Pennsylvania, in Rhode Island. It was terrible. And I was doing business with a firm up in New Haven. Connecticut has a place called the Southbury Training School. You ever hear of it?
Yes.
And it's very hard to get in there. But this friend of mine says to me, "You move to Connecticut." He says, "I'll get him into Southbury." So we sold our house in New Rochelle, bought a house in North Stanford, and weeks go by and months go by and nothing happens. Can't get him in there. One day I'm waiting on a customer, and had a bad day. I was unhappy, and this customer's an old customer. He says, "Sam, what's the matter?"
What was your business at this time?
What?
What was the business at this time? What and where was the business?
46th
Oh,
Street.
you were still in New
Community.
York. Okay.
And he says to me, "What's your problem?" And I tell this guy that I had. I'm the head of the mental health department of the state of New York. And he says, "I can get your son into Southbury. We have reciprocal arrangements. We take one of theirs, we get one of ours." And I give him Philip's name, and would you believe it? The next week, Philip is in Southbury. Philip is now 57 years old. I moved up there to Southbury. I used to belong to a golf club in Greenwich. And when I moved up, I went and I joined Rolling Hills. Sylvia was a great golfer. We played. I met Sylvia at a golf club, and when I came up here, I joined Temple Sinai, and what else do you want to know?
Okay, so
you met Sylvia, this is before you came to Stanford,
I
right?
went away for a weekend with 3 other men. There was a hotel in London, I think it was called Leighton's, and went up there to play golf. And after 9 holes, you had a choice of going to the hotel for lunch, or you ate lunch at. They had a little shack there, and we decided to have lunch right near the shack. And these 2 girls came over and they sat down at the next table. And I looked at this girl and I says to the guys, I says, "You see that red-headed girl? I'm gonna marry her." And with that, I went over. I asked them to join us, and sure enough, I married her.
What year was that?
Let's see. When I got married, I was an old bachelor. I was 39. Sylvia was 10 years younger than I was. It was in 1939. And we had a wonderful life together.
And your business state, how long did you keep your
We were in
business?
business in 1978. We had in New York, everything is union. We had upstairs, we had 10 tailors working for us. We had a slew of salesmen, and we had, if you hired a salesman and you kept him 2 weeks, you were married to him for life. If you hired a tailor and you kept him 2 weeks, you were married to him. And we had union problems. And we made some money, and one day I says to my partner, I said, "Listen," I said, "I had enough." I says, "I'd like to retire." He says, he says, "Oh no," he said, "I want to stay." He said, "Will you stay?" I said, "I'm going to sell my share." I was fed up with the help. They were arrogant. And he went home that night and he spoke to his wife, and the next day he came in, he says, "All right, let's wind it up." And the reason at that time, we had to sign a new lease. And I didn't want to sign another lease for another 5 or 10 years. So we ran with going out of business sale. I don't want to tell you how much goods we bought before the sale. I'll give you an idea. We ran the year going out of business sale in Times, and Tuesday morning, and I usually get in at 9 o'clock. This time the train was late. I got in at 10. When I got to the store, I couldn't walk in. It was filled. You have no idea when you have an excuse for a sale. God Almighty, it was fantastic. Well, we wind up with some money, and I started to go up to Rolling Hills. I used to play golf every day. And 5 years ago, Sylvia wasn't feeling well, and she had a couple of minor little accidents, and I took away the key. We took away her keys, and her friends were down here, so I put up the house for sale, and by the way, I sold the house 3 times.
And it fell through?
The first time, we were going to contract, and I get a call from my broker that so-and-so wants a $5,000 deduction. He was an Italian guy. I says, "Nothing doing." That fell through. A week later, I sold the house, and the septic system was so-so. The guy says to me, "Let's put a new septic system. You pay half and I'll pay half." I said, "Okay." It was $15,000, and they started to work, and they changed their mind. So I upped the price for the septic system. And listen, I did everything wrong with the house. I painted it. I put a new furnace in. So I added it on to my original price. And one day a guy walks in and he says to me, "How much you want for the house?" And I tell him, he says, "I'll take it." And what did he do with the house after he bought it? He tore it down.
Oh,
You should see what he put up there.
Where was the house?
You know what sawmill is?
Yes.
Beautiful. By the way, I had a very beautiful piece of land. It was 287 feet frontage. The land ran this way, and there was a ridge behind me. Oh, and I had a beautiful house. But listen, she was unhappy up there, and so I sold it.
and let me ask you another slant of things here. This is about Stamford as you knew it, or or the environs outside of Stamford. From the time you got here to now, what are some of the key things you remember about?
I think Stamford is a well-run town. It's clean. The school system is fairly good. Anyway, I belonged to the club for 30 years, and when Sylvie got sick and she couldn't play, and the gals up at the Rolling Hills decided they want a new clubhouse, and they assessed each member $15,000, and I quit. So I went over to one day by myself to Sterling Farms, and I played that golf course. Now, if I would have played Sterling Farms once before I ever joined Rolling Hills, I would have never joined Rolling Hills. You have no idea what an asset those two golf clubs out to Stamford. Stamford is a very desirable place to live. And why do you think all these corporations open up in Stamford? You know why? The CEOs and all the officials, their clubs were up here. A lot of them go up to Greenwich. But Stamford is a great little city.
Are there any let's see, what year did you get to Stamford?
Well, let's see, 1939. I'd say 45.
Okay. So obviously there's been some major
Was
change.
it?
There's been some major changes since then. I mean, that was when there was still Pacific Street and no Turnpike, right?
I'll tell you, I don't know much about Stamford because I used to work 6 days a week. The 7th day I used to play golf. So I started to learn about Stamford. I think it's a great city. I really do.
How old were you when you retired?
Pardon?
How old were you when you retired?
I was 78.
Mhm.
Okay. Let me. Have you been involved, other than being a member of Temple Sinai? Have you been active in anything? Any Jewish?
I couldn't be active. I used to work 6 days a week. By the way, when we first went in business, it wasn't 6 days a week. It was 7 days a week. Not until we moved to 46th Street. We used to work 7 days a week. Sunday was a great business day. It was the second best day of the week.
Well, you can tell us who it is.
So who is it? Who's the woman?
Marilyn Monroe.
Okay.
I'll tell you the story.
Okay.
when she married, what's his name, the writer,
The writer. Oh,
he was a customer of ours for 40 years. And when she married him to the, you know, it was a big deal. And Life magazine calls me up, and they said, we understand that Mr. what was his name, buys us clothes from you. We'd like to have Marilyn Monroe come down and purchase some clothes for Arthur Miller.
Arthur Miller.
So I said, great. When are you going to come down? And we make a date for next Wednesday. I used to take off Wednesday to play golf. So this Wednesday I came in to work. I wanted to see what happens. Nobody showed up. So I told my partner, I said, I'm going to take off tomorrow. And I took off Thursday and I played 9 holes. And after 9 holes, I used to call up the store, you know, what's doing? My partner says to me, the store's closed. I said, what are you talking about? He says, Marilyn Monroe is here. He says, there must be thousands of people. They saw her come in. They had cops on horseback. See these windows? Those windows? Those windows were 10 foot high. And they were afraid that they can break a window. So, you got that picture. So I says to him, what does she look like? He says, Sam, if you ever saw her, she says, she's wearing a red dress with nothing underneath. He says, she's got a body like you've never seen in your life. By the way, did you fellas see this?
Sam, we thank you for spending time with us and sharing your life story for the Jewish Historical Society. I will edit this into a DVD, of which you'll get a copy back, and the other copy will go into the archives.
Thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome. Bye now. Okay, Sam, tell me about this painting that we're looking at.
This is a copy of Cézanne's painting that sold 10 years ago for $45 million. You could have my painting for $1 million. Cheap.
Cheap. Very good, very good. And how about these on the wall?
These are all from copies of original paintings.
I see. Okay. What's this one? Who's the original artist?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the name of these artists.
Okay.
This is
What's that? What about this one?
I don't know the artist.
Okay. Oh, what's that picture down on the table? Is that your wife in her youth?
Yeah, that's my wife.
Very nice. Of course, I only knew her recently in the Temple Sinai in recent years.